Hey there, friend. I'm genuinely happy you're here. If you choose to subscribe, it would mean a lot to me, more than I can put into words. Now let's not waste time. Let's get into it. When Ethan Caldwell stepped through the front door that Thursday morning, boots crusted with dried earth and the sharp scent of oil still clinging to his fingers, he wasn't prepared for the image that greeted him. His wife waiting at the entrance, holding divorce papers in one hand and a cardboard box in the other. The television still hummed in the background. A half-finished green smoothie sat untouched on the counter. Nothing seemed disturbed. No shouting, no mess. Just a stage set for a final act, like she'd rehearsed the moment down to the lighting cues. "Keys go in the box," Lauren said flatly, her eyes locked on his. Her arms crossed with precision. The sunlight gleamed off her luxury watch as she stood like a statue beside the bay window. She wore the same tailored blazer she had on the first time they met. Now it looked more like armor than fashion, suited for battle. Ethan looked at his stained hands, the black grease clinging to his skin. "Lauren, what's going on?" Her response came without pause. "This is me finally being honest. I'm done pretending. Your routine, you're safe. I found someone who actually sees me." His heart didn't break. It simply paused. It wasn't the words that struck him. It was the hollowness in her expression, like she'd just completed a task on her to-do list. Behind her, a suitcase stood at attention. His suitcase, already zipped, already tagged. "You packed my things?" he asked quietly. "Just what you'll need for now," she said, voice measured and cold. "Once the papers are signed, you can arrange to collect the rest. I've spoken to an attorney. We co-own the house, but if you make trouble, the court will side with me. So don't." He didn't argue, didn't scream, didn't even ask who she had fallen for. There was no need. Too many late-night yoga retreats, too many dinners that got rescheduled, too many messages she thought he hadn't seen. Instead, he turned toward the hallway, slowly, almost reverently. His eyes traced the walls he had painted, the fixtures he'd chosen by hand, the family photos, the hardwood floors he'd laid down himself, the drywall cut with his father's old tools. This wasn't just shelter, it was a shared dream. Or at least it was supposed to be. Lauren's tone didn't waver. "Chase has already started dividing the accounts, and the Range Rover? It's in my name. Don't even think about it." Still, Ethan said nothing. Not out of defeat, but because he was absorbing. She wasn't revealing a secret. She was reciting the final page of a report. Smooth, clinical, smug. With one hand on the doorknob, her nails perfectly manicured, she added, "Do yourself a favor, don't come back." The door slammed behind him. What Lauren failed to understand, what she never even thought to ask, was that Ethan had anticipated this day for quite some time. Not because he suspected infidelity, but because the trust had already started to fade long before her affection did. He didn't go far. He didn't need to. Just 30 miles beyond the last strip mall, past neatly trimmed suburbs and well-lit intersections, stood a forgotten cabin off Route 11. It looked tired. The porch sagged. Pine needles littered the rusting roof. The garage leaned like it had given up. But to Ethan, it was sacred. His grandfather's retreat. Eventually his. Lauren had never stepped inside. Not because it was secret, but because she'd never cared to see where he disappeared to when he needed peace. He dropped the suitcase, still sealed, and left it there, untouched. He walked straight to the back room, now serving as a makeshift study. Dust blanketed everything like snowfall. Inside the old desk, behind a locked drawer, he retrieved a plain leather folder. No logos, no names, just 3 embossed words: separation protocol. He'd started compiling it 2 years ago, not in paranoia, but in preparation. He'd noticed the change in her long before she said a word, the distance in her voice, the way she angled her phone screen away from him. Weekend getaways that didn't match the hotel receipts. This wasn't driven by rage, it was methodical. Ethan had spent his youth fixing machines and his adulthood managing people who broke them. He recognized warning signs. He understood failure patterns. Inside the binder, a fully funded revocable trust solely in his name. A holding company registered in Wyoming, Redstone Ridge Group, title transfers, account adjustments, mail rerouted months in advance. Utilities shifted quietly behind the scenes. He told no one, not even Brandon, his cousin, his confidant. This wasn't revenge. It was control, neat, legal, impersonal when it had to be. Lauren had always underestimated him. To her, he was just a quiet mechanic, a man of few words, steady, predictable. But she had confused restraint for weakness. His silence was calculated. He opened his laptop, no cloud services, no stored passwords. Everything was local, encrypted, private. He accessed the trust dashboard, scanned through the assets. The house? Now under Redstone Ridge. Joint accounts? Moved gradually with perfect legality. The car she loved to drive? Technically leased by a company she didn't even know existed. She had built her plan on assumptions. He had spent 2 years dismantling everyone. The first thread began to snap during a massage. Lauren Caldwell lay stretched out on a heated table at Opal Creek Wellness Retreat. A soft jazz track drifted through the air. Lavender mist tingled at the edge of her senses. Her phone buzzed next to a sweating glass of lemon water. Once, twice, 3 times. She finally glanced at the screen. Payment declined. Red text flashing. She blinked, unsure. Tried again. Same result. That can't be right, she murmured, retyping the card details. It was the same card she'd always used. For groceries, for getaways, for things she never thanked Ethan for. He always paid without question. Reliable, stiff, predictable. She called Chase Bank. Waited through looping music, her irritation mounting. "Yes, I'm at Opal Creek trying to run a card," she said crisply. "Joint account, Caldwell, Lauren Caldwell, my husband, well, ex, is Ethan Caldwell." A brief silence followed. "I'm sorry, ma'am," came the gentle reply. "That account has been transferred to a private trust. Only the designated trustee can authorize transactions." "Excuse me?" she said, bolting upright. The towel slipped to the floor. "I'm afraid that's all I can disclose," the representative said. "You'll need to contact the trustee directly." She hung up without warning. Her hands trembled as she tapped open the Chase app. Access denied. She switched to BMO, their once joint savings account. Session timed out. Identity verification required. She retried. Still locked out. A cold weight settled in her chest. Something wasn't right. She called her sister. "Sam, have you heard from Ethan recently?" "Not since that cookout in April. Why?" Lauren's voice tightened like a wire. "He's doing something sketchy with the finances. I don't know what exactly, but he's cutting me off. My card just got declined. I thought he was out of your life. Why would he still be tied to anything?" "I didn't throw him out, Sam. I moved forward. That's not the same." Even as she said it, her certainty wavered. She hadn't checked the mortgage in months. Had no clue who was still on the title. Ethan had always handled the boring, bureaucratic stuff. Now those details were suffocating her. She hurried back to the hotel, dumped her things into a tote, and checked out ahead of schedule. When her card was declined again, and the receptionist gave her a gentle, almost sympathetic smile, she forced one of her own. "Just a tech issue, I'll fix it." But dread twisted in her gut. She drove faster than usual, music blasting but failing to drown the noise inside her head. When she pulled into the street, she hit the garage opener. Nothing. Tried again. Still dead. Her jaw clenched. She parked on the curb and marched toward the house in designer sandals, tote over her shoulder like a shield. The smart lock didn't respond. She slammed her fist on the doorframe. Nothing. Circling to the mailbox, she wrenched it open, fingers shaking. Inside sat a thick envelope. No postage. Just her name scrawled neatly on the front. She tore it open. 3 documents. A legal trust declaration, a title reassignment. A sealed cover letter labeled Occupant Notification. Her eyes darted over the lines. Effective immediately, the property at 42 Elmridge Lane is no longer under your ownership or tenancy. The deed has been transferred in accordance with trust guidelines. Your right of access is revoked. Please vacate within 30 days or consult legal representation. She stumbled back a step. Then another. The house she had poured herself into, the one she flaunted on social media as her oasis, was no longer hers. Not even partially. And Ethan had made it happen. Behind the scenes. She hadn't planned on heading to the cabin. Honestly, it had slipped her mind completely. She used to mock it, Ethan's so-called retreat. She and her friends had laughed over wine and roasted figs, calling it a glorified storage shed. Now, her fingers clutched the wheel of a borrowed car, knuckles blanched. Her Lexus was still in the driveway, registered to a shell company she couldn't access. Credit cards, frozen, utilities, transferred. Even her phone, part of the household plan, was losing service intermittently. Every sign pointed to Ethan. Gravel kicked up as she sped along the forest path. Trees pressed in on both sides, branches reaching skyward like claws. The cabin crouched at the end of the road, weathered and silent. No light spilled from the windows. A faint coil of smoke lifted from the chimney. Somewhere nearby, a generator buzzed. She didn't knock. She hammered on the door. It creaked open. Ethan stood there. Same flannel shirt she used to joke about, smelling faintly of oil and patience. His beard was thicker now, eyes darker. But he wasn't angry. Not even surprised. Just finished. She shoved her way inside. "You don't get to do this," she snapped, holding out the papers. "You don't get to dismantle my life like some control freak with a vendetta. This is calculated cruelty." He closed the door behind her, slowly. "And you'd be the expert on cruelty." "I told you I needed a new path," she shouted. "I was honest about what I wanted, about what I earned." He tilted his head. "Honest? You called me a drag, mocked me for wanting something lasting. Never once did you ask about what I was building in that garage." "I thought you were just fiddling with junk." "I was," he said calmly. "I was building my exit strategy." Her voice faltered. The silence between them sharpened like glass. Outside, the wind clawed at the windows as if trying to listen in. Lauren crossed her arms, not out of defiance, but to keep herself from unraveling. "You calculated this," she said. "Watched, waited, and then struck like some accountant with a grudge." He shook his head. "I didn't strike. I endured. I adapted. Then I moved." She blinked. He motioned toward a binder resting on a nearby table. "You always thought I was slow, passive, easy to ignore. You were so busy chasing upgrades, you didn't see I was the one keeping the foundation intact. You twisted everything." "I protected myself," he replied, steel in his voice. "You tossed me out like junk mail in front of a house I paid to maintain. You smirked when the door closed behind me. You wanted me to grovel." He stepped closer. "But I don't grovel, Lauren. I prepare." Her throat constricted. She swallowed barely. "I didn't think you'd actually follow through." "And that," Ethan said, voice like a blade, "was your fatal flaw. You mistook my quiet for surrender." She looked at him then, really looked, not as the man who fixed clogged drains and missed anniversaries, but as someone who had dismantled her life with surgical intent. Her lip quivered. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said, colder than she'd ever heard him. "That's what you never grasped. This isn't payback. That part's already done. You're just the last one to realize it." He opened the door, not to welcome her, but to show her out. She stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned beneath her designer heels. The door shut behind her with a soft, final click that hit harder than any slam. Lauren didn't move for nearly a full minute, not because she was confused, but because clarity had finally set in. The most brutal truth wasn't that Ethan had changed. It was that he hadn't. This was still the man who brewed her tea every morning without asking her preference, who built her a herb garden after she offhandedly mentioned liking basil, who once drove across the state just to fix her father's light fixture. He never raised his voice, because when he spoke it was deliberate. Now she understood how terrifying certainty could be. She staggered back to the car, collapsed into the driver's seat, and grasped the ignition, but didn't start it. Instead, she stared at her reflection in the windshield. Smudged mascara, cracked lips, pale skin beneath the ruins of expensive foundation that no longer masked the fear. She drove. Not to any home if she still had one. Not to Sam, whose texts were now just strings of emojis and empty sympathy. Not to the friends who had eagerly liked her new chapter posts, then disappeared the moment her life became less curated. She ended up parked behind a dilapidated strip center, the kind where tired fluorescent lights hummed like gnats and a yoga studio tried and failed to cover the sour stench of sweat with layers of lemon-scented cleanser. Sealed inside the stale hush of her rental car, she broke open. One ragged sob clawed its way out, rough and unpracticed, as if it had waited years to be released. Her manicured hands clutched the steering wheel, and for the first time since that morning, since she told Ethan to leave, she actually felt something. She'd called it empowerment back then. She'd raised a glass to her own liberation, crystal chiming against crystal, self-satisfied and proud. But now, something long buried surfaced. A thing she'd pretended wasn't there. She hadn't planned for this moment, never imagined she'd need to. Ethan had been her constant, the steady rhythm beneath the noise she liked to flaunt, the quiet order in the chaos she claimed to crave. And now, she was unraveling, adrift, foundationless, and suspended in a kind of freedom that felt more like falling. When she finally pulled up to what had once been her house, it no longer felt familiar. Darkness poured from the windows. The yard had been trimmed by unfamiliar hands. Even the air around it seemed different. She checked the mailbox, once crammed full of flyers Ethan used to sort meticulously, and found only a single envelope addressed blandly to current resident. Inside, a property transfer notice, confirmation of sale, a wired funds receipt deposited into a trust labeled Caldwell Futures, and a short, cold cover letter signed by Ethan's attorney. Lauren dropped onto the front steps, papers trembling in her grip as she read each word with the slow horror of watching a train crash in real time. It wasn't just the house. The ski retreat in Colorado was gone too, the one she used to post about like a trophy. The savings account, once earmarked for emergencies, the retirement portfolio, the leased luxury car, even the security system access codes, all of it had been neatly removed from her life, deliberately, without a trace. Technically, Ethan hadn't taken anything from her. He'd simply made sure she'd never owned any of it to begin with. She opened her phone. His contact was still saved as just E, still pinned as a favorite, still starred. She tapped the name. No ring, disconnected. She switched to Instagram. His profile had vanished. She scrolled through old posts, suddenly aware of what had always been missing. Photos where he'd been left out. Trips he hadn't attended. Captions she'd once written with confidence. Embracing freedom, just good vibes now. And the last one, her mid-laugh, glass of champagne raised, read, happiness redefined. But beneath it, a fresh comment had appeared, posted only a day earlier. Thought your husband bought that place? Funny, the wire details say otherwise. Her fingers went slack, and the phone slipped from her hand, striking the stone with a sharp clatter. A breeze picked up, not cold exactly, but intrusive. The kind of wind that sneaks past collars and cuffs, slipping into marrow like a warning. Inside, the house seemed to be dying. The refrigerator let out a low, rattling sigh. She turned the kitchen faucet. Nothing came, not even a drip. Then came the final message. It was from Eric, Ethan's son. Dad says the house is sold. Everything's going into the kids' trust. You're not part of it. Just wanted to let you know. Hope you're all right. She didn't respond. What could she say? That she'd sent away the only person who never shouted, believing he had nothing left to give? That she watched him walk out with a suitcase and assumed he'd return, humbled? But he hadn't crawled back. He disappeared, stepped cleanly into a life without her. And she? She was left standing alone in the silence he'd always carried with him. No applause, no aesthetic, no curated escape plan. Only the echo of a man who never needed to raise his voice to leave a mark. And that, dear reader, is where our story closes. Leave your thoughts below if you'd like. Thank you for reading. If this story struck a chord, explore more on the channel. Until next time.